Penn State Wrestling does it again. I'm Thomas Frank Carr here with Greg Pickle. The Nittany Lions won the regular season title and now the postseason title, this time in team record fashion. Greg Pickle was at the Bryce Jordan Center. Must have been nice to have the hour drive home. Still, the 90 minutes home after a thing still blows my mind, especially when you're getting home that late, Greg. But you were at the Bryce Jordan Center last 2 days for all of this stuff. So welcome to the show. Hopefully you've caught up on your sleep, and let's talk about it. Let's get into Penn State getting another Big Ten championship under their belt as they prepare for the NCAA Championship coming up starting later this month. So what was your big takeaway from this weekend?
More records, T. Frank, more records. It feels like anytime Penn State Wrestling goes into an event, you should just go ahead and get a story ready for it breaking whatever record there is to break. A school record, 184 team points. Obviously, that led the Nittany Lions to a fourth consecutive Big Ten title on the strength of a school record 7 Big Ten champions. So it didn't set any Big Ten records here. The most champs in one tournament, 1983 Iowa had 9, which led them to a conference record 200 team points. Penn State fans, I think, and I did a story on Sunday morning looking at if it was possible after Saturday for Penn State to go to 200 or above. It was. And then Cole Mirasola lost his consolation semifinal to start today, and that pretty much ended any shot at that. So still a good weekend, obviously, for Penn State. 7 champs, a runner-up, a 5th and 7th place finisher, and they got all 10 through to nationals. So Cale Sanderson speaking afterwards. You can watch his full news conference with Levi Haines and Mitchell Mesenbrink here on the BWI YouTube channel. But, for all the success they had, his last answer, T. Frank, and you can read his full transcript as well at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, was the one that I think matters the most to this Penn State wrestling program. And it's that Penn State qualified 10 for nationals. They come out of this tournament healthy, and everything else that comes with it is just window dressing for what they prepare for every season, which is the national tournament that's coming up a week from Thursday in Cleveland.
Yeah, so let's go through it because, as much as they have their eyes set on a larger prize, I think it's also still good to go through what happened and for Penn State fans to celebrate all of the success that the team has had, including some young rising stars that we all know about, but to see them and the questions that I think there were from the regular season, Greg, of who have they wrestled? Has it been that strong of a conference schedule? And then they go out and get 7 of 10 to individual champions. So let's go through that. Obviously, we'll start with Luke Liddell at 125 pounds. So how did this go for him over the weekend?
Yeah, the nation's top-ranked 125-pound wrestler had a great match with Jor Volk of Minnesota, formerly of Wyoming. He somehow missed him in both of the dual meets they had with Wyoming the last 2 years. I'd have to go back and look and see what exactly the reason for that was. I think Luke did wrestle both of them, but Jor Volk did not. Anyway, he's at Minnesota now, 2-time All-American, and a tremendous scrambler. He got out of some deep shots from Luke Liddell in the finals that I'm still not sure how he managed to do it, but in the end, Luke Liddell finished off a takedown in sudden victory to win the 125-pound his title, his second, 4-1 over Jor Volk to secure not just a Big Ten title, T. Frank, but also the top seed at nationals at 125 pounds. So as we talk about the Big Ten championships, should note as we record on Monday, seeds for nationals come out on Wednesday, 8 p.m. selection show on NCAA.com. And so we'll know more about the national tournament here a little bit later in the week, but we wanted to jump on here and recap this past weekend. And yeah, it started in the finals with Luke Liddell getting a sudden victory.
Yeah, so Marcus Blaze comes up next at 133. Another top wrestler had a bye in the first round. So how did his tournament play out?
Yeah, so he ends up winning by major decision and decision. Won by sudden victory over Drake Ayala in the semifinals, and then lost to Ben Davino of Ohio State in tiebreaker. Of course, everyone remembers that Blaze beat Davino in tiebreaker during the regular season, so the coin flip came down on the side of the Buckeyes this time around. I think this is a good learning experience for Blaze. I thought the match he won against Davino was, and I think this one is too. I think against a top guy like that, just has to get a little bit more offense going. They now have 2 weeks to come up with a plan to do exactly that. So Marcus Blaze will be fine. When you talk about seeding for nationals, it's going to be a fascinating conversation there. It really is. This weight class is insane. Going into the weekend, the top-ranked wrestler in the country, Lucas Bird, did not have a very good tournament at all. To Davino, who was number 3, beat Blaze, who was number 2. I do believe Jack's Forrest won a Big 12 title, so he does. I'm not sure how many matches he's up to now. I guess it doesn't really matter. But anyway, good luck seeding 133 pounds. I'm not sure where Marcus Blaze is going to end up, but certainly he had a very good regular season. He's going to end up near the top of that seeding chart at 133 pounds. Obviously, I'm not sure number one is going to be in play after losing to Davino, even though they split in the regular season. So we'll see. Again, if I was on the committee that's meeting in person today as we talk Monday, March 9th to come up with the at-large selections and then seed the bracket, 133 is not what I'd want to do, T. Frank. This is a very challenging bracket to seed, and it's going to be probably the most fun bracket at the national tournament.
Yeah, and just kind of like the conversation here, probably a lot of that seating talk is going to go to 133 as opposed to a couple other places where, there's going to be some pretty clear delineations with the top guy at the very least. So
not a whole lot of thought needed at 165. We'll talk about that here in a few minutes.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking about. Braeden Davis, he was the wild card here, other than heavyweight of a wrestler who would they get the automatic qualifying bid. You mentioned that if he just finishes with his pre-seeding in the tournament, he would make that happen. He finishes. Tell us, how did he finish?
Yeah, so he finished 7th. The Nittany Lion ended up being the 6th seed for this tournament. He was number 7 in the pre-seeds, but ended up being 6th after they changed some things on Friday. And he had a good start to the tournament, won a decision over Dario Lemus of Maryland in round 1, and then got run over by Vance Vonbar of Minnesota in the quarterfinals. Won his first consolation match in 26-second fall, and then lost his second one, giving him the opportunity to still qualify for nationals because the Big Ten allocates 7 spots at 141 pounds. So what did he do on Sunday? He came out, beat Billy DeCraker of Northwestern for the second time this season, and that puts him into the NCAA tournament as a 7th-place finisher at Big Ten. His seeding is not going to be great at nationals. He will have a difficult road to be an All-American, which obviously will be his goal for the second year in a row.
Yeah.
But you got to get to the dance to have a chance at, T. Frank, the old saying, whatever saying you want to use this time of year, March Madness and everything else, you just got to get there. Got to get to Cleveland, and anything can happen once you're in Cleveland. Good for guys like him who will be seated lower than they want to be, and sometimes bad for guys who are seated where they want to be higher. So we'll see, but not a bad tournament for Braeden Davis. Still have some, stamina concerns for him going into nationals. We'll have 2 weeks to try and get that dialed in. But at the end of the day, for as much crap as the guy takes, it seems like a top-tier teammate. He was out there for every finals match cheering on his teammates. He came off a red shirt. This sounds ridiculous because it kind of is, but he, as a guy who redshirted the whole first half of the year and was going to save a year of eligibility, I mean, he would have, in theory, had any reason to be like, you know what, I don't want to go into the lineup now. Where I don't have a chance to ramp up, where I haven't been controlling my weight, where I'm not going to be at my best probably in March that I know I can be. He'll be as close to it as he can, I'm sure. But he could have selfishly said, no, I'm not doing that. If you guys figure it out. And he did. So I think he gets credit for that. And certainly we'll see if he can finish higher than where he'll be seated. He's going to need to, I think, to be an All-American at Nationals a little bit later this month.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I was going to ask you about like his season and how you feel about the way he's wrestled, given the context of the situation that he's been in, and how all of that can affect him going forward. Because it has been, I think, it's unfair to Braeden Davis of you are in this murderer's row of unbelievably elite wrestlers, and maybe you have that opportunity to be that yourself at some point, but the situation you were put into doesn't really lend itself to you being your absolute best at this point. And we've seen, whether it's injuries or something over his career, it's been a little bit inconsistent in the lineup. So let's move on then to 149 and get into some of this that happened that turned it Penn State's way, predictably, with Shane Van Ness.
Yeah, so Shane Van Ness had just a weird tournament, T. Frank, a really weird tournament. He started out with 2 come-from-behind victories in this 149-pound Big Ten bracket. Came back to beat Ryder Block in the quarterfinals 5-4 on the strength of Block being called for stalling 4 times, including a final one that was 2 points. It was the difference for Penn State wrestler Shane Van Ness over Ryder Block. He came back to beat Lachlan McNeil of Michigan 11-10 in the semis. And then there was no doubt left in the finals. He pins Ethan Stiles in 3:28. Here's the one thing I cannot get anyone to confirm for me, which is a little bit frustrating, but I think it's true. So Ethan Stiles is who Shane Van Ness pinned at Nationals last year to clinch the team title for Penn State in Philadelphia. I'm pretty sure when he pinned Ethan Styles in 328 at Big Tens this year, that clinched a Big Ten tournament for Penn State. And so I think he pinned Ethan Styles twice in 2 years, once to clinch an NCAA title and once to clinch a Big Ten title, which is kind of interesting. But either way, if they didn't clinch it there, they clinched with PJ Duke, who we'll talk about here in just a second. But Shane Van Ness needs to get his offense going a little bit quicker. Everyone knows that, including him. But otherwise, the guy can score when he needs to score. He can come back when he needs to come back. We saw that when he came back to beat Carter Young earlier this year. It's just a matter of how dangerously you want to keep living. And I'm sure Shane Van Ness and his coaches prefer he did not keep living as dangerously as he does. But, we'll see where he ends up in the national tournament. Should be a number one seed, obviously, for sure.
PJ Duke, the outstanding wrestler of the tournament, I believe. He won that award afterwards. Is that the correct term for that? Yes. I apologize if I read that wrong the other day. So obviously a guy who wins a championship here, but take us through his tournament.
Yeah, PJ Duke, we'll start at the end with the finals. He lost to Antrell Taylor in tiebreaker back during the regular season of Nebraska, the number one wrestler at 157 pounds in the Big Ten for seeding purposes. And he comes out, PJ Duke does in that final, and just had a completely different game plan, forced a stall call on Antrell Taylor early in the first period. That meant Antrell Taylor was not going to be able to kind of rope-a-dope a little bit like he did in the dual meet, and then he was going to have to engage with PJ Duke, and that was bad news for what looked like a little bit tired Antrell Taylor. Duke beats him by major decision, 12-4. I don't think that will be enough to get him the number one seed at the national tournament. Could it be? Yeah, I guess. I don't think it will be, though. I expect him to be obviously a top 3, top 4 seed, but I don't think that will be enough to propel him to number one. We'll see. Brandon Cannon from Ohio State obviously is going to fall. Antrell Taylor is going to fall. I didn't look at Big 12 results before doing this. We'll have more of seeding thoughts over at BlueWaveIllustrated.com later this week. But, Meyer Shapiro from Cornell, as long as he won the Ivy League championship, which I'm sure he did, figures to be the number one seed. But he does not have a win like PJ Duke does, a major decision now over defending national champ. So we'll see, T. Frank. It's not out of the realm of possibility that PJ Duke goes into nationals. And for the first time, it's the number one seed. I'm just not anywhere close to ready to call it a guarantee.
Yeah, and one thing that is guaranteed, though, is Mitchell Mesenbrink. He had another one of those in the tournament. So tell us about his performance this past weekend.
Yeah, so give me one sec here to check this out. Okay, so Meyer Shapiro of Cornell actually lost in the Ivy League semifinal. So let me rescind what I just said. PJ Duke will now have every reason and will be, very, very, very likely to be the number one seed at the national tournament. I should have checked that out. It's not a morning of research around the country, that's for sure. But yeah, so I'll back up real quick because we can buzz through Mitchell Mesenbrink. There's not a whole lot to talk about with him other than how great he is. But going into this weekend, Brandon Cannon, Intermat's number one seed, had a terrible tournament, lost, including a loss to PJ Duke, by the way, in the quarterfinals. Meyer Shapiro, number 2 by Intermat, goes to the Ivy League finals, loses in the title bout. Antrell Taylor was number 3. We know how that worked out. Then PJ Duke was number 4. I'm not sure what Lance Robideau did in the Big 12 finals, or if he even got there for that matter, for Oklahoma State. But yeah, point being, T. Frank, I think when you look at this 157-pound bracket, as I talked my way through this live on recording, if you will, he'll have every reason to be the number one seed. And certainly I think if he is the number one seed, it will be well-deserved based on how he took it to a defending national champion, like he did with Antrell Taylor at 157 pounds. Moving on to Mitchell Mesenbrink, I'll just make that quick. Obviously, the guy just continues to beat Mikey Caliendo. It's hard for me not to feel a little bit bad for Mikey Caliendo of Iowa at this point. Mesenbrink has now beat him 8 times. I can't recall how many of those are in finals or on the way to finals. But without a Mitchell Mesenbrink, man, Mikey Caliendo would be at least a one-time national champ. And he just picked the wrong time. Obviously, he didn't choose it, but he picked the wrong time to be a 165-pound wrestler in the Big Ten and in the country because Mitchell Mesenbrink has his number and will continue to have his number.
So Levi Haines won another championship here, Big Ten championship here. So how did his tournament go?
Yeah, and Caleb Larkin of Arizona State, who's number 6, beat Robideau of Oklahoma State in the Big 12 final. So that number one seed should be PJ Dukes. Just to put a final bow on that, 45 minutes later, it should be okay.
Yeah, by 174, 157 is totally wrapped up.
Yeah. Levi Haines, good tournament. Started out with a technical fall. Then he beat Carson Karchla again of Ohio State. And then he wrapped up by beating Christopher Minto of Nebraska for the second time this season, 2-1 in the finals. Didn't love that match for Levi Haines. He got an escape, and Minto was called for, I can't remember if it was locked hands or contact to the head. I don't recall. But anyway, the point being is that there was not a lot of offense for Levi Haines in that match compared to when he beat him 8-6. That's okay, obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously, he will have time to rectify that, and you just have to win and advance. And Levi Haines, if we know anything about him, he wins and advances, so he got the job done. Will he need some more offense if he faces Christopher Minto again? Yes. The good news is, obviously, if you're Penn State, you look at this and say, okay, he may have had the best game plan he's going to have to face Levi Haines, and you still beat him 2-1, albeit with limited offense. So we'll see. Haines goes into the Nationals like Mitchell Mesenbrink, if I didn't say it, as the number 1 seed without question, and that takes us to 184.
Yeah, and 184, some nail biters for Rocco Welsh, who gets it done. So take us through his tournament.
Yeah, Rocco Welsh is I'm kind of curious to see what kind of reaction he gets at the NCAA tournament, because through really no fault of his own, he's kind of become a little bit of a villain after this weekend. The Iowa fans don't like him because there's video of him pulling Angelo Ferrari's singlet during the quarterfinal match that Rocco Welsh won over him 3-2 in tiebreaker 2. We beat Brock Mantanona 8-5 in sudden victory of Michigan in the semis, and then he beat Max McAnally 2-1 in tiebreaker 2. Minnesota fans think there was a takedown for McAnally during tiebreaker 1 after Welsh escaped. It was awarded on the mat after time expired. Then they went to review. No one has still been able to tell me whether they were reviewing whether or not it was a takedown, or whether they were viewing, yes, it was a takedown, but was it in time? I still don't have an answer. And I don't know. There's a lot of arguing going on the internet, and I don't know how you can argue about it if you don't know that answer. And I think Christian Piles at Flow said a replay official told him that when Welsh was returned to the mat, there was like 9/10 of a second left. So obviously you're not going to get control in less than a second. But fans think there was control before that, before we hiked him up and threw him to the mat. Rocco Welsh asked him afterwards. He said he had his hand on the mat when there was reaction time involved, but there is no hand support takedowns anymore. There hasn't been for a couple years. So I don't know. Honestly, there's a lot of people on the internet who have forgotten more about wrestling than I ever will. I am not going to be an arbiter or a tiebreaker on this particular topic. But either way, I'm kind of curious to see what kind of reaction Rocco Welsh gets. Cale Sanderson very pointed afterwards, talking about the seeding situation from before the tournament, making note that he felt like Rocco Welsh got a raw deal with how this bracket was seeded based on his comments afterwards, which again, you can watch here on Blue White Illustrated's YouTube channel. So it is what it is. He won all 3 matches, all of them after regulation, and he's a Big Ten champ, and that's really all you can ask for. He beat the number 2 ranked guy going into this, obviously Angelo Ferrari. He beat McAnally. He's beat Silas Allred and Mantanona Fitch. So, long story short, he will be your number 1 seed at 184 pounds at the national tournament after winning a Big Ten title.
Just looking at this here, we're getting to 197 with Josh Barr. Is this the most dominant win and run in the tournament from the Penn State wrestlers?
I struggle with this, T. Frank, because the simple thing for me to say is that Mitchell Mesenbrink is the most dominant wrestler on this Penn State team. And then you watch Josh Barr, and you're forced to choose, and I know it didn't necessarily come up in the finals in this tournament, but Levi Haines is pretty darn dominant too. So it is a nasty decision-making process you have to make, and Shane Van Ness can score with the best of them as well, as long as he doesn't get behind by too many points. So I say all that to say this, Josh Barr wins all 3 of his matches in this tournament by technical fall, 21-6 in the quarters, 18-3 in the semis, and 19-6 in the finals. I am so excited to see him hopefully face Rocky Elam of Iowa State in the finals at NCAA's at 197 pounds. It's pretty clear at this excuse me, T. Frank. It's pretty clear at this point that nobody in the Big Ten can hold a candle to Josh Barr at this point, obviously. So looking ahead to nationals, I would expect him to roll right into the finals. We also didn't get a chance to see him wrestle Joey Novak of Wyoming, who's number 3 this year, because obviously Josh Barr missed that match with the rib injury back in October, November, whenever it was, I think November, or maybe early December even. Either way, it wasn't back yet. So fun national tournament ahead for Josh Barr, but he goes in as a favorite. I don't know how else you can look at it. The guy just beats the heck out of everyone over and over and over again. Beat up the Big Ten. He'll beat up most of the competition at nationals, and maybe we'll see if somebody from outside of the Big Ten can give him a challenge in Cleveland in a couple weeks.
Yep. So then we get to, after going through 6 of their 7 individual champions, we get to heavyweight and Cole Mirasola. So what happened with Cole, who has just a very interesting journey this year as the team's heavyweight?
Yeah, interesting tournament for Cole Mirasola. He opened up with a pin in 25 seconds in round 1. That was impressive. He then beat Braxton Amos of Wisconsin in the quarterfinals, who would later medically forfeit to him in the 5th place match after Cole Mirasola lost to Ben Kiter of Iowa 4-2 in the consolation semifinals. He ended up there because he lost again to Tay Galati of Michigan 5-2. In the semis. So, the question for Cole is he's going to go in as the 5th seed in the 5th finisher, rather, in the Big Ten tournament. Where does he go in these brackets? I don't know, man. Good luck seeing this thing after you get past Younger Bastida of Iowa State and Isaac Trumbull of NC State. They will be the clear top 2 seeds. After that, good luck figuring this thing out, man. Because then you have, after those 2 at the top, you have all Big Ten guys except for the Oklahoma State kid at number 7. And it's going to be a bear to seed heavyweight because there's a lot of conflicting results, especially from Big Ten heavyweights. So, Cole Mirasola, obviously, there's matches he has all the talent in the world to be an All-American. And I just think it depends how this all plays out for him seeding-wise. He really feels to me like a seed-dependent All-American potentially. If he gets a draw that puts him on the wrong side of things early, it's going to be a tough road back, obviously, if he would not win. So we'll see. But, definitely don't count him out. That Nick Feldman win told us all we needed to know. And he's been wrestling so much better in the second half and down the stretch. And he wrestled really well in this tournament. Just wasn't able to get it done late. And then just looked maybe a little bit less energetic than usual in that consolation semifinal. And so we'll see how he does at nationals. But all 10 are going. I'm going. We'll be in Cleveland in 2 weeks for the national tournament, and they'll be here before we know it, D. Frank.
So you mentioned the national tournament. You've been previewing the seeding as we've gone through all those individual weight brackets and kind of looking at the national stage. Do you have any final thoughts about maybe the biggest wild card among the seeds, the most opportunity Penn State has when it comes to the seeding? Obviously Braeden Davis and Cole Mirasola.
Break down 157 again.
I think we're good. Honestly, I think that was your best work, but also I think we're good there. So any other thoughts about the seeding coming up before we move on to the high school side of things that happened that you were also at this week, which is crazy?
Yeah, so Davis will slot in where he slots in. I don't. That's going to be a harder one to figure out to me. If you're asking me which is the more interesting of the two, it's heavyweight. I mean, someone's going to end up on the wrong side of the draw, and there's a lot of guys who can beat a lot of guys in that weight. 141 is not dissimilar. I just you look at Cole Mirasola, he's the number 5 guy in the country. Doesn't really get talked about like the number 5 guy in the country.
Yeah,
and with Braeden Davis, he has yet to lose to somebody who is. He has yet to lose this season to somebody ranked below him, believe it or not. So, where does he end up here? Who does he face? How does that make a difference? So, yeah, I mean, it goes without saying Wednesday night, the seeds come out at 8. It's usually an hour-long show that goes until 9. 75-80% of it I'll have written ahead of time, and then we'll just wait and see where Davis and Mirasola ends up. It's always a heavyweight, man. Can't ever just have a question about the first guy that comes out. No, it's always the guy that goes at the end of the show. But we'll see. Looking forward to the national tournament. We'll break that down a good bit here in the future then on BlueWhiteIllustrated.com.
Okay, so there were 4, I want to say, high school athletes at the PIAAs that you were tracking this weekend as well. A couple of top Penn State, related players. So what happened there this weekend as well in the future of the program?
Yeah, so a good weekend for Penn State down at the PIAA State Championships in Hershey. Landon Siding, class of 2027 commit from Norwin High School, won his second PIAA title at 121 pounds. Class 3A action, looked really good all tournament long. Class of 2026 signing Elijah Brown won the 215-pound 3A title, his second in a row. Former Pitt commit signed with Penn State back in November, headed to State College later this year. They plan to grow him into a heavyweight. Obviously, he thinks he can wrestle around 245, 250 in college at some point. So good high school career for him comes to a close. And then 2 other commits. Class of 2026 signee Braeden Weaver from Altoona finished 5th at 133 pounds in Class 3A, and James Whitbread of State College, 2027 signee, finished 5th at 152. And then Cale Sanderson's son Teague, also on the mat, 172-pound freshman, finished 3rd in his first state tournament. Had a really nice debut in Hershey. So a good weekend for Penn State connections down at the PIAA State Championships. Landon Seiden will be going into the freestyle circuit here, I'm sure, as we get into that offseason. And for the rest of those guys, they're either heading to Penn State, or in the case of James Whitbread, we'll be doing some offseason work as well. So good weekend for Penn State recruits in Hershey. And I believe this coming weekend we have Ohio State, where Gray Burnett will be in action, and we might have New Jersey States too with Jaden James. So I'll check into that. We'll have coverage of it over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com.
Never stops for Greg. And like you mentioned, the NCAA tournament coming up later this month. We'll have coverage of that here. Of course, you'll have it at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, and we'll have it here on the YouTube channel. And then we'll be covering the offseason stuff as well. So, we aren't here every single week, but we are providing you wrestling coverage throughout the season at the critical moments, at the highlights. So join us. Subscribe here to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Appreciate you being here, Greg. We'll be back next week after, when we want to talk about wrestling again, give you a preview of the NCAA tournament. I forget your schedule.
I think we'll have to go early next week, T. Frank, because I'll hit the road for Cleveland on Wednesday. So Monday or Tuesday next week, I would think would be our best bet. And make sure we get a preview show done for nationals. We'll have the seeds in hand at the end of this week, fortunately. So unlike the Big Ten tournament, where they release it about what feels like 9 minutes before the tournament starts, the NCAA puts it out a week beforehand. So we appreciate that. And appreciate you all listening throughout the season. And one more tournament to go, T. Frank, and it's the one that matters most.
Yep. So we'll be back to preview that early next week here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. For Greg Pickle, I'm Thomas Frank Carr. We'll talk to you later.